super excited to continue our conversation. We were able to chat this week. And I think it's amazing that we're able to follow the conversation that Chris and Kate were having, and then the extraordinary panel talking about the UN's goals. I'm just going to take a moment to introduce our panelists. Dr. Angela Jackson leads New Profits Future of Work Initiative, which seeks to close career readiness gap for Americans from low-income backgrounds. Angela's career started in the private sector, leading business development for organizations like Viacom and Nokia. While working internationally, she began to wonder, if multinational companies could deliver their products consistently and with quality at scale, what would it take to deliver social innovations like education and health in a similar manner? That could be like a whole nother panel, considering no one's back in school right now. Dee is the founder of the newly launched We Suite, congratulations, a membership network and platform for women leaders and creators. In addition to providing, and I have to say, I have been able to be at some of your sessions, and they were extraordinary. In addition to providing its members with the community and tools to succeed in the workplace, the We Suite supports brands and corporations with their culture building and diversity initiatives. Over the years, Dee has attracted numerous business and cultural leaders, small names like Queen Raina and Melinda Gates and Christy Turlington, as well as many, many others. I'm Gina Hadley. I'm the co-founder of The Second Shift, a marketplace that connects a vetted membership of professional women who work flexibly with companies to solve their most pressing issues. And as you can imagine, the transformation of the workplace is an obsession of ours at The Second Shift. So I am beyond excited to talk with both of you and get your insights on what we can do to change it for the good for all of us. I wanted to also say that the questions are there. I will keep them open. Please, I would love to get some input from the audience, and I'll monitor that, ladies, so that you don't have to. First, I wanted to ask both of you, and Angela, I'll start with you. How has this seismic shift affected the communities that you serve? And what does the transformation of the workplace actually mean to you? So I'm going to leave you with that small question.
It's that small question, right? So as you shared, when I lead the future of work at New Profit, we're a philanthropy. We've been around for 20 years investing in complex social problems. As it relates to the future of work, when I joined 2 years ago, it was really about upmarket solutions. Like, how do we take middle skill workers and really get them prepared for higher level jobs? When we looked at the pandemic and when it hit in March, what we saw was this new designation of essential workers. And as we shared yesterday, these are people who never signed up to be essential workers, right? All the things that we thought we couldn't do in work, like work remote, give special benefits to mothers, parents, right? Giving cost and money for equipment and home equipment, all of that happened. And I think what we saw when we're sheltered all in place at the same time is that we all had a shared lived reality of being impacted by this pandemic, and really had to think about the lived realities of others, right? So if your babysitter couldn't get in because of the pandemic, you were deeply affected. It doesn't matter how much you make it work, right? And I think when we think about the future of work now, really thinking about a future of work that's more empathetic, it's more worker-centered, and really centering on the lived realities of people who work. I mean, when we think about COVID, the workforce didn't work for a majority of people, right? You got 40% of Americans who couldn't take a $400 shop. So let's say their car broke down, they couldn't get a babysitter. You had, working mothers who were just trying to figure it out, afraid to ask for a day off, caring for elderly parents, etc. What we're seeing now is those are non-negotiables. Those are just part of making kind of a humane workplace. And my hope is that the future of work will really encompass the lived realities of people in a more humane way.
Sorry, I had muted myself there for a sec. Dee, I'm going to pose the same question to you. How has this seismic moment that we're having affected the communities you serve, and what does transformation in the workplace mean to you?
Sure. So, I serve a community of women leaders and creators. So a mix of founders and executives who have senior level positions at corporations. And so certainly the rug was pulled out from under women, and particularly so for mothers who suddenly had to juggle and sort of renegotiate their lives in a different way. I would say that, it presents both challenges and opportunities. So, for example, if you are an executive right now, how do you network? How do you form new relationships? How do you build your career through the network of sort of people you build around you if you are not in a physical space, if you are not going into the office, if you are not going to industry events? And so suddenly, my company and my business, where I actually sort of slightly panicked when the work from home order came into effect, because I thought, my business was actually anchored around sort of physical, sort of in-person connection. And suddenly, we were in this sort of digital world. But actually what I saw for my women was that they were pulling together more than ever. One, to sort of continue to sort of build and deepen relationships, but also to draw on the community for ideas and support. So whether it was workplace related issues they were trying to solve for, or whether it was just sort of, navigating things personally as women, as mothers, they were really sort of drawing on the experiences of my members just to solve for that. And because we were all in this together, like it was a brand new situation for everybody, it was really about like, how are you doing it? How are you navigating this? And so I loved that sense of, really sort of pulling together and being one community. I think for founders, it's a very interesting time because, again, we're in this sort of new next normal, whatever we're calling it. And it's presented challenges that, could present opportunities for founders. Like, how do we solve for the issues that this remote lifestyle has presented? So, for example, I used to struggle, particularly at the height of the pandemic, to order groceries. Like, I just couldn't, everyone sort of ordered everything that was in the stores, but also there were no drivers, essential workers who were being sort of like overextended. And so it was impossible to do very simple things. And so I think it presents certainly an opportunity as well for women and for founders to really look at the pain points that were revealed and how they can solve for those.
I'm for both of you, community and empathy are part of how you see us changing for good. Angela, when you look at the founders and well, first of all, before I go on, I need to ask you, and I meant to ask you this when we spoke the other day. Can you talk to us about New Profits Brand Challenge? Because that will bring us to the next point in the conversation. I'm so curious to hear what that is and what that entails.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched in June the Future of Work Grand Challenge, and really the spirit behind that is thinking about how do we at scale prepare people for the future of work, and really prepare people who may not have had opportunities for formal learning, who may not have gone back to get an advanced degree. How do they learn and prepare for the future while they're doing their real and actual lives, where they're raising families and while they're currently working? So we launched this $6 million challenge for innovators to think of ways via distance using technology that they could rapidly upskill, that people could rapidly upskill for less time and less cost. And we're also providing wraparound supports. What happened is I'd been working on this for 2 years, and then COVID hit. We had planned to launch the initiative in November, and we actually pushed up into June of this year because we really felt like we had some solutions that could help in this moment. And it's really helping in two ways. One is we're funding entrepreneurs who are working on accelerated learning programs, who are working on platforms like Dee mentioned to connect people using technology. I'm in Boston. That doesn't mean that I want to network with someone who's in New York. And with technology, we can do that. So we're going to fund innovators $6 million, for-profit and nonprofit innovators who actually come up with ideas to train people and to just make those connections The second piece of it is we thought it was important to take this technology to where people are. So we're not waiting for people to find these innovators. We're partnering with workforce boards and job centers and communities throughout the United States, where we're actually going to take this technology to communities and test it with actual workers. And that's the beauty of working with the X Prize Foundation, one of our partners. They use the wisdom of the crowd to think about how can we surface the best and brightest innovations and minds, and how do we put it to work against like the world's hardest and most critical problems.
I will be. Please keep us updated on how we can learn more about that. I'm so curious as to learn what some of these innovations are, because I think that we can all agree, and we had this conversation yesterday, and then I'm going to come back to you around this community and empathy question, and this leads into it. We had the conversation that we see companies taking on the role that historically government did, where companies have become the social safety net for their employees. How do you feel that large companies and innovators alike can take on these roles in order to help, whether a small company or large, whether an entrepreneur or somebody who's starting a new venture, maybe somebody who's funding new companies, to make sure that we're building organizations that will take care of their employees, which will then lead us to this transformation of the workplace, which feels more inclusive for all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting time for companies. There's a report that Edelman put out every year called the Trust Barometer, which has shown that, so over time, increasingly customers or the public have more faith in the brands that they buy from, than they do in government to really solve social issues, which is disturbing in of itself. And I think that, obviously there are brands who genuinely care, and there are brands who are focused on the bottom line, but, whatever their reasons, they have a customer base who care about these issues, who were, certainly triggered by Black Lives Matter, were triggered by the additional pressure that was put on essential workers during this time, and who are demanding more from the brands they buy from. And so I think that any brand that wants to sort of survive this period and into the future has to really think about, one, its internal structures. What does their workforce look like? How representative is their workforce? What does their senior leadership look like? And how is it representing the sort of population at large? What are their boards look like? And then sort of, it's about pipelines and supply diversity. It's about, what they're selling and their processes. And so I think, it's a sort of ground up overhaul for companies who want to, be around for the foreseeable future. In terms of what they can do, I think that, there are those sort of internal fixes that I think every brand has to look at first. Like, what do we represent on the inside? And then it's really thinking about, these issues going forward, and how do we prepare, how do they prepare their employees for this, for the world of the future? So it's things like, again, as a mother, I've noticed that there are people who do not have access to things that I'm taking for granted, like computers, like access to Wi-Fi. Those sort of simple things that allow us to navigate, this time fairly comfortably. There are a lot of people out there who don't have that, and I think that there are companies who are in a position to be able to provide that, to provide those simple, like the simple services that really, frankly, everyone should have access to. So I think it's, definitely goes to providing sort of internet connectivity, to providing equipment that might support their workforce. It's about childcare. It's massively about childcare. Most kids are not going back to school full time, and most are virtual. So then, if you are an essential worker and you have to go to work, who is looking after your children? If you are from a higher income bracket, you've probably solved for that with nannies and with pods, but not everybody has those opportunities. So I think that these are all areas in which companies can really step up and show that they really stand behind the many statements they made during sort of Black Lives Matter and during this sort of time of upheaval.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
it is.
I was just going to add, Dee, I think, when I think about this issue and we think about the pandemic and, the number of billionaires that made, increase their fortunes by 15%, what we're seeing at this point is like a need for this like shared economy, right? And shared wealth. And when we look at years past, you think about Sears, they're not around anymore, but they dedicated 10% of their revenues to their employees. And so in the early days of Sears, people who retired from there retired as millionaires, right? And so I'm not saying we have to go that drastic, but there's something about employers being responsible for their people and knowing that there's certain things I could just call it the social determinants of work. What makes work possible? We need to make sure that people have transportation. We need to make sure that they can feed their kids and they can go to the doctor and that they have childcare. Like that's just a basic. And I think we have to stop now that we know that that's been exposed. We can't go back to the way it was, accepting less than that. I think as women, women and men, right, are advocates. We need to say these are non-negotiables, not just for the senior executives and high executives, but for everyone, right? When I was an executive in Nokia, they sent me back to INSEAD Business School in France and spent literally, tens of thousands of dollars on me getting an advanced degree. Like, I greatly appreciated that, but I could have afforded that on my own. What about the junior employee who really needs that? And so we should think about training as a benefit for everyone that we deserve, right? Not something that's just something for the people who are at the highest on the ladder.
Well, that is a perfect segue into our question from Chris Hames has a question for us. A lot of platforms are focused on senior women and talent. What about those that are younger, new into their roles, who need development? How does this look in the transformation of work? So I'm going to, Angela, why don't I start with you? What are your thoughts on this in terms of what platforms can do in order to help younger people in their development and embracing what we all know could be a better workplace for everybody?
Absolutely. We're starting to see companies differentiate themselves by doing that now. So you see Walmart, for example, they have a partnership with Guild Education where their associates can go back and start their advanced degree or associate's degree for $1 a day. There's Merit America. So the thing about it, I always say the programs are there. The business model is there. Now it's just about the willingness, right, of companies to take advantage of these. There's models out there that have made them affordable, that also look at income share agreements to make this training affordable. Now it's just up to employers and for us to really begin asking employers to adopt these programs.
Dee, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Many of your network are established, experienced entrepreneurs and founders. How can they help younger generations to develop into the kind of workforce that will solidify some of the things that what we're talking about right now?
Yeah, I mean, the mantra that we use within the We Suite is that we pay it forward, back, and sideways, right? And so it's not just about supporting one another. It's really about women who want to pay it forward and who want to see a more equal and more level workplace in the future. And so I would say almost, every member within the community is mentoring or sponsoring in some form. And I strongly believe in the idea of sponsorship. In particular, I think that there are training opportunities out there for younger people. I see a lot of them, and I definitely see a lot of networks geared towards young people. And so I think that they exist. For me, the issue is, we put a huge amount of emphasis, particularly when it comes to women, on training them. So as if that is the sort of be all and end all, as if, we identify societal problems and we think, oh, well, it's, women just need to get better at doing this. They need to get better at asking. They need to get better, and I think that training is important, but it's really about access. And it's about who's speaking out for you, and it's about who's providing introductions, for you, and like who's advocating for you. And I think for me, certainly I want to provide a service for women in leadership, to sort of further their careers. But what I also want to do is see them pay that forward by bringing up other young women. And because we all have, believe in the same values.
It is we just got a comment from Norma, who said, exec women need to help those rising up the ranks. Let's share our survival guides. And I echo that. I think that there are opportunities for role models, men, women, people of color, LGBTQ communities, those who have unfortunately not had the easiest road to continue. And we talked about this, and Dee, you said something that really struck me yesterday is don't hide your hardships. And so I believe that if we can continue this dialogue around this, I'm getting a little flashing warning there. We have a couple of minutes. The one thing I wanted to ask the both of you is on the question of empathy, which is something that's very hard to codify and to measure. What would be your words of sage advice for our community that's watching right now as to how to use empathy to transform the workplace and why that's so important? Dee, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind.
I mean, I think that, it starts first of all with really sort of changing your worldview. So I think it's hard to have empathy if you don't really have an understanding of what's happening around you. And so many of us move in silos where we're really surrounded by people who think and look like us. And so I think the first step for anyone is to really diversify our networks. And there are so many ways in which you can do that, whether it's by joining networks, or whether it's by what you read, what you watch, where you go. You can, I think that's really sort of the first step to developing an understanding of what other people might be going through that you don't understand. So I think most people, for example, might have taken for granted that everyone has enough computers in their homes and everyone has internet. But what this has exposed is that actually that's not true, and that almost half the population do not have access to these basic needs. And so empathy really starts with, I think, self-education. And then it's really about sort of, using the resources you have to support people. So for example, we go to a local public school. There are, kids who are sort of being put into pods, and the PTA were sort of raising money to help support that. And a number of us spoke up and said that we would want any money that was raised to ensure that everyone had access to the same thing. So I don't want it to just be about me having access, but anyone who has sort of less income or less opportunities than I have should also be able to tap into that pot of money. And also, local schools that may have a less perhaps affluent parent base, we should fundraise for those too. So I think it's just really about sort of broadening the lens, through which you do things.
Angela, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you the empathy quickly because I'm getting I feel like I'm on the Oscars and the music is starting to play.
I just think, we've just been put in a global timeout, right, with coronavirus. I just want to leave everybody with, we know that it wasn't normal before. We cannot go back to that state. We can't unsee what we've seen. And so if people vote with their dollars, how they spend, what they buy, who they choose to buy from, who they choose to spend their time with, their social capital, who you're connecting with on LinkedIn, every choice that we make, we're making a more equitable world or an inequitable world. So it's very easy. We don't have to make this complicated, right? But every decision being really intentional about how you're using your time, your resources, and your talents.
This was extraordinary. I want to thank all of you, both of you, for being part of this. I am going to give you one moment to plug how everybody can get in touch with you, what your platforms are, and then Juliet would be loath if I didn't ask you, how do you power forward moving into fall 2020? So I'll start with you, Angela.
Yeah, so I power forward, through fall, just with radical self-care. And when I say empathy, it's also having empathy for myself, right? We try to do it all in the beginning of the pandemic. I was like, I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to work out, and I'm going to do this and that. And part of it was like, can I get through this moment sane and with my family healthy? So that's how I power through, giving myself grace, and would look forward to partnering with any of the innovators who have ideas on the line. They can Google New Profits and Future of Work, and they will find our information, or they can follow me on Twitter at AngJack, ANGJCK.
Excellent. And Dee,
Um,
what's your power forward for
my
fall?
power forward. You
Used
know,
to be cashmere and leather, and now it's not that important anymore.
I don't know. I mean, I think the way that I've managed to power forward through this period is just by being more nimble, and just just pivoting comfortably and quickly. And so I've really sort of developed and honed that skill of not really feeling too sort of wedded to any one idea or any one mode of operating, and just moving quickly to respond to things. And so I think it's all about being nimble going forward. Um, for anyone who wants to contact me or join the community, it's thewesuite.com, so WIE suite.com. So it sounds like the C-suite, but it's for women who think bigger than the C-suite. So please do reach out.
This was amazing. We could go on all day. We didn't even get into the Facebook backlash. We had all these others, so we'll save that. I want to thank both of you so much for the important work that you do. I am more optimistic after our session than I was before, and I feel like with this much energy and this much focus, perhaps we will smash these archetypes and this mythology about what it is to be an employee in the United States.